On this episode of Practical Church Planting, we're talking about how to do a service run-through. Well, hey everybody, welcome to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you and everybody else plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian, joined today by Dylan Dodson, and today we're talking about how to do a service run-through.
So yeah, we're going to talk through how to prepare for your service. Now you may be thinking, we're a small church, we don't have a lot going on. Why do we even need to do a run through of our service before your service? So let's just say real briefly why it's important and then how. Even if like you're starting out and it's just maybe you have a guy playing acoustic guitar and you're preaching and that's it. It's still just the peace of mind of knowing how are these transitions going to flow? Because it's one thing to say, here's what we're going to do, but then if you don't even know if it's going to happen, you can get, like, there's nothing worse than like if you're preaching or if you're leading worship or you got someone running slides and they're not quite sure what the next thing is supposed to be. Like, it's hard not to get distracted of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit when talking about preparing for sermons. You don't really realize the issues or the things that are going to come up until you actually practice it.
Right.
So it's important to run through to even see those issues that you might not even recognize.
And it's helpful too because, as we launched, our services are more complex now than when we launched.
Yeah, for sure.
But because we had a rhythm and a system of running through our services, as we added new elements, it wasn't like this awkward, we don't know what to do, because we practiced it beforehand. So we would say it's really important because it gets everybody on the same page so that when the service starts, what's actually going to happen. Everyone's been through it once, so you know that they know what they're going to do. And it just makes it for a better service because, again, nothing's worse than really awkward transitions. People don't know what's happening. And so they're just important to get everyone on the same page before you do it. So here's how we do it here, and you can take some tips for you. So what we do, the first thing we do is, we use Planning Center to plan our services. And so you can either have everyone pull it up on the app or print out a few pieces of paper. Who is involved in our service run through is everyone who's involved in the service. So band, anyone who's on stage, sound, screens, if you're doing anything that has to do with the service itself, you're part of the run through. And first thing we do is we take 5 or 10 minutes and we just talk through the service. So we say, this person's going to say this at this point, the songs, okay, after this song, definitely talk through each of the transitions. After this song, is there a bumper video? Is there a prayer? What's happening after the message, who's coming up when. And so you talk through it. I think a lot of times that's all people do is they talk through it and then they get on stage and it doesn't go well. Like you were saying, when you preach your sermons out loud, you can say, oh, this sounds good, this doesn't. When you actually go through it, you find out that, oh, this transition doesn't work this well because this person has to get out of the way. And so again, it may seem like, well, there's only me and one other person, but it's still good to know and have the peace of mind to know what it looks like. So the first thing we do is we just take 5 or 10 minutes, talk through the service. The person who runs our sound, who's our production lead for the week, is the one that typically does that. So we talk through it, and then we do our service, and we literally do the service. Even if you feel like you don't need to or whatever, we do the entire service, which means the band plays all their songs. They practice their transitions. We practice, we have lights and screens and all that sort of thing. And so what happens, though, is in between songs, if there needs to be a light change or if there needs to be a video played or if someone's coming up with a microphone or I'm coming up with a microphone and the mic's muted and the screens are not changed or, the lights weren't changed, we will stop and go back to the end of the song, for example, and redo that transition again so that everyone's on the same page of what's going to happen. And what's interesting about this is the one who's speaking most weeks, it gives me great peace of mind. If you're preaching, you'd probably say, yes, this would be really helpful for me to know that everybody knows what they're doing because you're focused on what you have to say and what's coming up. And it's just not fun to be like, oh, is this transition going to work? Or I'm not sure they know what they're doing. So, on the front end, it's really helpful, but it's not just for you. It's also for people on the back end, which Brian does a lot of our screens and stuff on a lot of weekends. So why don't you kind of share how it's beneficial for you to know as well?
Well, one thing I think is it's really beneficial for someone who's newer serving to see how important these things are. Because it's very easy, like if you're doing screens or doing lights and you come in a second or two later to say, that was my bad, but I know during service, and everyone kind of ignore it and act like it's no big deal. But for a new person who maybe makes these mistakes, or maybe someone who's in training, they'll see that, hey, it's not, obviously everyone makes mistakes and we have grace, but it's not okay to make these necessarily mistakes in service. We want it to be good. And so it's not as a form of like punishment that we're doing. It's just making sure that everyone knows that everyone's on the same page and things are going the way that it's planned.
And with that too, like you were saying, so we recently had a couple who joined our church, was with a large church. And they came, they both play in the band. Their first week, we actually did our run through. They were so surprised and they said, thank you for doing this. Because they're like, oh, this shows that you really care about what you're doing, and it allows us to know how everything's going to flow. So like we're not walking on stage and we're not sure who's supposed to do what when. And so it sets the culture of what we're doing is important. So let's plan and prepare
Yep.
like it's important.
And one thing that helps kind of on the production side, so how we run things here is we generally have 2 people in the production booth, one doing sound and one doing screens and lights. You may have more people and more have less, but if you have more than one person, it really helps them to be able to communicate and kind of get on the same page with what the other one's doing. Because if you've been working with someone back there for a while, you kind of get the hang of communicating without actually speaking during service, But if you're newer, you don't have that. So if there's some transition where you need to make sure you're coordinating with the other person, you can do that while talking out loud and making noise during run through, instead of having to wait until service and trying to, especially if you have a smaller space, trying to whisper, trying to make sure people don't hear you and make sure to coordinate, and it just becomes far too difficult. So I think it's really beneficial, not just for the people on stage, but for the people that are kind of running the show from the back, to make sure everyone is
and it's
working
easy
together.
to forget too, like, oh, it's really easy to go to the next slide or the next thing. So you might think it's not a lot of work, but if you're new, you're intimidated, you don't want to mess up. It gives you an opportunity to really try things. And that's what we tell people, especially if they're new to serving in the production team, and say, hey, we're doing run through. The point of run through is to help us to get the kinks out. So if you mess up on a light or a screen, or you don't, that's not a big deal. We're just going to redo it so that you can know, and it makes them feel like, oh, I can actually try this out before I mess it up.
Yeah, and I mean, we say we don't want to do this. I think everyone says that come Sunday morning, they want everything to already be all planned out and everything to be exactly how it's going to go. But a lot of times it comes time to where we make changes last minute on Sunday just because whatever reason, And so this gives us time to be able to make those changes and practice them, make sure everyone's on the same page. I mean, I've said that 1,000 times, but it gives you kind of that time to be able to make those changes without having to run around and tell everyone, make sure everyone knows.
You can actually try it out. So again, here's how we do it. We talk through the service, and then we do it. So we do the songs from beginning to end. If someone's doing next steps, or if we got a video, they'll come up there with the mic, and so they'll make sure it's unmuted or unmuted at the same time. And again, it's been really helpful because before we realized, oh, when you're praying here, I need more time to get ready. Or you're in my way, so can you move? It just gives you the opportunity. Then I'll come up, whoever who's speaking that day. We don't do the message. I'll talk about this at the end, how we do the message. I don't talk through the message. There's really no point to do that.
Right.
Hopefully you have prepared. If not, listen to previous episodes on prepping for messages. But I'll come up on stage just to make sure the mic and the lights are good, and then I'll pray, and we normally do a song after the message. We might have another element or two. And so literally, other than the message, everything is done in completion. We even do, the music comes on at the end of the service. So in the run through, as soon as we end the service, the music has to come on. We have a 2-minute countdown video that we play. So that has to, and it gives us the opportunity to try everything. Again, you may be saying, at this point, our service is not complex, so we can get away with doing this. But I would just say, you don't want to just get away with it. And you want to plan and prepare for where you're going, not for where you are. And as you add new people to the mix and they say, oh, this is important, and they're like, oh, we can try that. Like, it's just vitally important. And even if it's just you and a sound person and a worship leader, it's just great for all of you to be on the same page before you do it. There's nothing worse than like praying and then like, or the worship guy thinking that the message was here because you didn't actually go through it. And it's not the end of the world. People will forgive you, but it does kind of lose the train of thought of what's happening in the service. People can get disengaged, and it just clears a lot of things up.
Yeah, I mean, I think as churches, obviously we want to be engaging people as much as possible, but Sunday is like game day. Sunday is like the day that everyone expects things to be good. So I think regardless of your size, it makes sense that you practice it, and practice the way things are going to go.
And that being said, as long as with this, it takes us it depends on how many songs you do and that sort of thing. It probably takes us about 30, 35 minutes to do our run through because we don't do the message. So you need to make sure that you're there and in place in time to do the run through.
True.
And I would just recommend being completely done with your run through at least 15 minutes. I'd probably say before, 20 minutes before your service starts. Because if you're doing run through as people are walking in, it just kind of looks like what's happening. It looks like they're not prepared.
Looks last minute.
So you actually do need to make sure you're coming early enough to be able to go through, to have time to talk through the service and then run through the service and be completely done before people start walking in.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I'll add before we kind of move on is, you said you don't preach the whole sermon, but we kind of do everything else. If you have someone up there who's doing like announcements or next steps or offering or any other elements other than preaching, especially if it's someone who hasn't done it 1,000 times, they need to go through it exactly how they're going to. It's very easy to be like, I'll come up with a story. I'll do something funny, whatever. I'll do something once I get up there. But it just, especially if it's one of their first times doing it, if they're not very experienced, it's
people,
not going to sound good.
It's really easy to stand in front of an empty room, and the announcement segment is kind of awkward, can be awkward anyway.
Yeah,
and so
sure.
we've had times where people are like, yeah, I'll be fine, and then they get up there and it's not fine.
Yeah.
Plus, again, if you have to do a complete run through, if you have slides for a couple of the announcements, we would recommend no more than 2 or 3, which we've got on a previous episode as well. We talk about announcements. That way the person doing slides can make sure they're transitioning well.
Yeah.
Again, you want everybody to be able to try it out before it's time to go so that everyone's on the same page.
Yep. I think there's very little things that are worse than an announcement person that doesn't know what the next announcement of the slide is.
Yes.
Says, let's see what the next announcement is, because
Yes.
they haven't gone over it to see what the next one is.
Yeah, they should know what they're going to
Yeah.
say so that everyone is not like, they don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So again, make time to talk to the service, 5 or 10 minutes. Even if there's not a lot of you, set the precedent. You'll be glad that you did. As things get more complex, you'll be able to handle it. Then give yourself 30, 35 minutes, however long it'll take you, maybe 20 minutes, doesn't matter, to actually do the entire run through minus the message, but still come up there like to do the transitions. And then make sure everything needs to be good. And if not, you try it, you redo it, and it's okay. And of course, it doesn't mean your service will be perfect, but it will be a lot better, and everyone will be on the same page.
Yeah, and you're totally right. If you're preaching, it gives you a lot of peace of mind, not having to worry about these little minor details.
And if you're preaching, bonus tip. This is not part of the
I love
how to
bonus
do
tips.
run through, but this is kind of the morning.
Yeah.
I print out my notes and give it to the screens person, because there's nothing worse than like trying to say, here's the point, and someone puts it up late or earlier, they take it down. You see that a lot. And so there's a really simple fix to make sure if someone's running your slides that they're on the same page as you. So I print out my notes, circle what's going to be on the slide, tell them, sometimes I'll say, we'll give them notes, like it'll say title slide. So basically after I read this, take it down, or how long to leave it up for. And then after run through, because you don't want to keep everyone waiting and sort of that sort of thing, I'll go to the sound booth to the person running slides, and I'll go over each of the points with them so that they know, this is circled, to make sure everything's spelled correctly, so that they have an idea of what's coming, so that the message is not the first time that they're doing it.
Yes.
Because again, you do slides a lot too, so you can speak to this, but I imagine, it's very nerve-wracking, and you don't want to be the one that messes up the message. But if you don't know, if you're waiting just for the pastor or the preacher to say something before you put on the slide, but you haven't talked through it beforehand, you don't know how long to leave it up. If you don't have the notes in front of you, you don't know, like, are they about to say it, or are they not about to say it? Because sometimes, and you can speak to this, you might say, here's when I'm going to say something, but then you get it mixed around on stage. But having the notes in front of you allows you to at least know where they are. So you're not like, oh, am I supposed to go here now? And so what would you say about that, doing slides, about having the notes in front of you?
That's a good call. So we've been doing this for a long time, but we didn't do it in the very early days.
We did not.
And it is a huge difference, because take it not just from being in the booth, but as someone listening to a service, I think, and maybe it's just a pet peeve of mine, but I think one of the worst things is hearing whoever speaking say, like, let's go to the next slide, or this is the next point, or something like that. It just needs to flow. And so being able to see the outline there and not having to worry about, did I accidentally miss something, kind of getting in your own head. Because sometimes, if we're being honest, sometimes, especially if you're doing a few different things back there, it's hard to pay attention to the entire service of everything that's being preached, because you got a few things going on. So knowing that you didn't miss something, you can kind of follow along in the notes. And like you said, sometimes a pastor will kind of, and even Dylan will like start to say a point and stop, or like about to say a point, but have something to say beforehand. To where if you didn't have the notes, you'd probably just put it up there and kind of honestly ruin the flow of it, because obviously they want it to come up at a certain point.
Yeah,
because
and that's
they're
the
building
point,
to it.
because sometimes it is like you do want things to wait, and if you're not sure when the point is coming because you don't have the notes to follow through, it can kind of mess up the moment a little bit.
Yep, and it kind of takes some of the guesswork out, like, because the way we do it now is even put in there like when to take it down. I have the point up until this point and then take it down, because then we're kind of moving on to something else. So it takes some of the guesswork out of it for the screens person to say, like, are people still paying attention to this? Do we need to move on? Where it's just all kind of laid out right there for you.
So that's how you do run through. Again, talk through it before the service. Run through your entire service, beginning to end. Make sure all the transitions are good. If it doesn't, back it up, do the transition again. It's not going to hurt anybody. And then I would say, go to the person, if you have someone running your slides and you're giving the message that week, literally print out your notes, circle what's supposed to be where, and just take 5 minutes and talk them through what's supposed to happen, or talk her through what's going to happen. And then that'll help the service.
Yep.
So if you have any questions that you want us to tackle in future episode of Practical Church Planting, Brian, where can they go?
practicalplanting.com/questions.
Submit a question there. And hey, if you find Practical Church Planting helpful, share it with your friends.
Yeah.
And also join the Facebook group. We have discussions every week, and so it's a great thing to join us there. So thanks for listening. We'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planting. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planning. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planning on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.